I knew my wedding wouldn't be simple, but I never imagined it would test me like this. What would you do if someone in your future family quietly tried to undo everything this marriage was supposed to stand for? I still don't know if I handled it perfectly, but I did what I thought was right. Here is everything that happened. The ballroom was perfect. Gold-trimmed chairs, crystal centerpieces glinting under chandeliers, soft jazz curling through the air like perfume. I should have been glowing with pride. Instead, my stomach twisted as I reached for another glass of champagne. That's when I heard it. She doesn't belong in this family. The words sliced through the music like broken glass. Aunt Patricia, perfectly powdered and poised, said it in a whisper, but not quiet enough. I turned my head in time to see her leaning toward one of Ethan's cousins, her voice smug, her eyes flicking toward the far end of the room. Toward my daughter. My Ella. My hand tightened around the champagne flute. It wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that, not even the worst, but tonight was supposed to be different. We were on the cusp of something new, a wedding, a union, a family, and still. She found a way to remind me I was never really welcome. Ella was sitting on the edge of the dance floor, tugging at the hem of her little silver dress, her curls bouncing as she turned her head, trying to catch the rhythm of the music. Oblivious to the venom spat in her direction. That innocence, that light, that's what they couldn't stand. I felt Ethan before I saw him. His hand touched the small of my back, a silent check-in. He always knew when something was wrong. I straightened my spine and offered a practiced smile. "You okay?" he asked, eyes scanning mine. "I'm fine," I lied. The same way I always did when I felt that familiar prickle of not enough. His gaze followed mine to Ella, and without a word he walked over, scooped her up, and lifted her onto his shoulders. She squealed, laughing, tiny arms flailing with joy. "To Rachel and Ethan?" Someone toasted behind us. Glasses clinked, the band shifted to a swing number. Ethan spun in a slow circle, Ella giggling above his head, and for a moment it was easy to believe this could work. He turned back to me, smiling like it was just us. "We're a team now," he said simply. And I believed him. I needed to. Because if I didn't, if I let that whisper burrow too deep, I'd unravel. I forced my feet toward the dance floor, toward Ella. My girl, my whole world. I reached up and she leaned down, her tiny hands grabbing my cheeks as she planted a sloppy kiss right between my eyes. "They're just jealous," she declared, with the kind of fierce certainty only a 9-year-old can pull off. I laughed, the sound catching in my throat like a sob that didn't quite escape. Maybe she was right. Maybe they were. I glanced back toward Aunt Patricia. She was watching us now, sipping her wine with a satisfied tilt of her chin. Let her watch. Let them all watch. Because I wasn't going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever. 9 years ago, I brought a child into this world with no one's hand to hold but a stranger's. The fluorescent lights in the hospital basement flickered as water from the storm seeped through the walls, the entire floor vibrating under the weight of the flood. The power had gone out hours before. Backup generators sputtered like my breath as I fought through another contraction. "Rachel, you're doing amazing," the nurse said. Her name was Janet, I think. I never saw her again after that night, but I remember the grip of her hand. Strong. Steady. Everything I wasn't. They'd already evacuated most of the floor, but there wasn't time to move me. Not when Ella was coming fast, no partner beside me, no family pacing the halls, just the sound of my own screams echoing off concrete walls and Janet whispering, "One more push, you've got this." When Ella's cry split through the darkness, I thought my heart might burst. She was red-faced, furious, tiny fists clenched like she was ready to fight the world. And maybe she was. Maybe she knew what waited for her outside that basement. That she'd be treated like she didn't belong. That some people like Aunt Patricia, would only see the absence of a father, not the abundance of love. I held her close, wet and wailing, and promised her everything. Safety. A home. A mother who'd never make her feel like she had to earn her place in the world. But promises made in pain are easy. Keeping them through the years, that's where I struggled. I moved back to the city after that. Took a receptionist job at a dentist's office just to pay the bills. The nurses passed Ella around like she was a celebrity every time I brought her in. "That's the baby from the flood," they'd whisper, grinning. I never corrected them. When Ella was 4, I met Ethan. He wasn't flashy. Not the type you find in stories. He showed up for his niece's appointment and stayed behind to ask me about the book on my desk. We talked about Tolstoy and coffee for an hour. A week later, he brought me a cappuccino with my name written in calligraphy across the lid. He never pushed, never asked questions about Ella's dad. He just showed up. Every time. With that quiet steadiness I hadn't realized I needed. And now, years later, we were here. At a rehearsal dinner in a ballroom too expensive for people like me. With Ella in the spotlight and Patricia's whispers clawing at the walls I'd spent nearly a decade building. But I remembered the basement. I remembered that I had already survived worse. And more importantly, so had Ella. The next morning, the ballroom had been transformed again. Linen tablecloths replaced with long brunch spreads, mimosas clinking in crystal flutes, and sunlight pouring through massive windows like some kind of divine spotlight. I should have been stressed. I should have been focused on schedules and vendors and the color of the hydrangeas. But all I could see was Ethan, crouched down to Ella's level, whispering something that made her throw her head back in laughter. They looked like they belonged in a photo album. Like the kind of memory kids carry into adulthood and pull out when the world gets too loud. "You're part of the team now, remember?" Ethan said as he scooped her up again. "Team awesome," Ella said proudly, wrapping her arms around his neck. That moment, that stupid, small, perfect moment, made something in me loosen. Maybe the whisper hadn't reached him. Maybe Patricia's opinions were just background noise, like the hum of air vents or clinking silverware. We were getting married tomorrow, for real. "Toast time!" someone called out, and suddenly all eyes turned to Ethan. He handed Ella off to me and stepped up to the mic with that easy confidence of his, the kind that came from never having to question whether or not he belonged in a room. He cleared his throat, smiling at the small crowd. "I know tomorrow's the big day, but today's the one I'll remember forever," he said. "Because today is the last day Rachel ever has to stand alone." He looked at me. Just me. And the air shifted. Even Ella went still in my arms. "We've been through a lot. A lot of weird dinners," he added with a wink, "and a lot of awkward introductions. But through it all, Rachel has never stopped being the fiercest, kindest, most stubborn woman I've ever met." People laughed, but I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Because I felt the weight of it. Every invisible bruise, every sideways comment, every time I swallowed my pride for Ella's sake. Lifting just a little. "She and Ella are already my family," Ethan continued, voice steady. "Tomorrow just makes it official, so, cheers. To the team. And to never standing alone again." The applause was polite. A few people even looked genuinely moved. But across the room, Patricia was sipping her drink, face unreadable, eyes sharp. I didn't need her approval. But I noticed her silence. Ella tugged at my hand, whispering, "Mom, are we really a team now?" I knelt down, brushing a curl from her forehead. "We always were, baby," I said. "They're just catching up." The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be seamless. Patricia had insisted on handling the seating chart, something about tradition and flow, her voice dripping with that trademark passive authority she wore like a brooch. I should have known better, should have checked it myself. But I was tired, I was hopeful, I was stupid. The first red flag was my sister's text, "We're here," but no place cards for us. I blinked at my phone, then scanned the tables. Ethan was busy greeting guests, so I slipped away and made my way toward the front. Sure enough, there they were. 3 tables of Ethan's extended family lined with pristine white place cards, each name hand-lettered in gold. And off to the side, a kids' table with plastic cups and dinosaur-themed napkins. At the very end of that mess sat a card labeled simply Ella. No last name, no title, just Ella. As if she were a party favor. "Excuse me," I said tightly, flagging down the event coordinator. "Was this the seating plan sent in last night?" She looked confused, flipping through her iPad. "This version came in this morning." "From Patricia Caldwell?" Of course. I looked over and saw Patricia deep in conversation with one of Ethan's great aunts, fanning herself like the southern aristocrat she imagined herself to be. My chest burned, but I swallowed it down. Ella tugged at my arm. Mommy, do I sit here? I crouched beside her. What do you want? I want to sit with you and Ethan, she said simply, as if that should be obvious. And it was, to anyone who actually saw her. Then that's where you'll be, I said, rising. I stormed toward Patricia, careful not to cause a scene. Not yet. Interesting seating choices, I said when I reached her. She turned, cool as ever. Oh, Rachel, we had to make a few adjustments for space. The children needed a place together. Ella isn't a child to be hidden away, she's part of this wedding, part of this family. A flicker of irritation crossed her face, but she recovered quickly. Darling, it's not personal, it's just logistics. No, it's very personal, I said, my voice quiet and sharp. And I'm changing it back. She smiled. Tight, practiced. If you insist. I walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. Back at our table, I pulled Ella's place card and tucked it next to mine. Then I texted my sister with a photo of the new arrangement. Within minutes, my family arrived. Pulling chairs, shifting plates, laughing like they'd always belonged. Across the room, Patricia's jaw tightened. Good. Let her chew on it. This wasn't just a rehearsal dinner. This was a warning shot. And I had just taken my seat at the head of the table. Later that night, I slipped away from the ballroom chaos under the pretense of needing fresh air. I just needed quiet. Somewhere without lace napkins and polite digs disguised as compliments. I found a small terrace off the second floor, half forgotten, empty except for a dying potted plant and a couple of lanterns flickering against the warm evening breeze. I hadn't even pulled in a full breath when I heard them. She's a sweet girl, but the situation's complicated. Patricia's voice floated through the open window above me. I froze. She'll confuse inheritance lines if we're not careful, she continued. Ethan means well, but love doesn't rewrite blood. The blood drained from my face. Rachel doesn't understand how these things work. She came in from nothing, and now she thinks she can rewrite the family tree. A low, murmured agreement from whoever she was speaking to, a cousin maybe. I didn't recognize the voice, and I didn't care. I pressed my back against the wall, fingers shaking around the champagne glass I'd brought with me. Not because I was surprised, but because the words still hit like a slap. Ella. She was talking about Ella. That little girl who still said elephant, like elephant. Who wrote Team Awesome on every drawing we stuck to the fridge. Who wore her flower girl dress in secret every night this week, just to practice walking fancy. My daughter. The light of my life. And to Patricia she was, what? A technicality? I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked. Back inside, the lights were dimmed for a speech. Ethan stood at the front of the room, one hand resting lightly on the back of my chair, the other holding a flute mid-toast. He beamed at me. Proud. Certain. The knot in my chest twisted tighter. I couldn't ruin this, not tonight, so I sat, smiled. Pretended like I hadn't just heard my child referred to as a legal inconvenience. After the toast, I kissed Ethan's cheek and whispered something about needing to check on the suite. He didn't question it. He never did when I needed space. Upstairs, I found Ella curled on the couch watching cartoons, still in her dress, her glitter shoes abandoned on the floor. Hey, Mama, she said sleepily. Did they like my twirl? I knelt beside her and kissed her forehead. They loved it. She giggled, burying her face in my shoulder. Good. I want to twirl all day at the wedding. I held her tight, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo, the last dregs of baby softness clinging to her cheeks. Ella, I whispered, you belong more than any of them ever will. She blinked up at me. Huh. Nothing, baby. Just, I love you. And I meant it like a vow. A new one, because they might question her place. But I never would. The suite was quiet that morning, sunlight stretching lazy fingers across the carpet. Ethan had taken Ella to the pool for a quick dip before the brunch, something to burn off the nervous energy before the last round of family chaos. I'd stayed behind, just for a moment of silence. The air smelled faintly of hotel soap and lavender from Ella's bubble bath the night before. I found her sketchbook on the nightstand, open to a drawing she'd finished before bed. Us. 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a crooked roof. Above it, she'd written in careful bubble letters, Team Awesome's Forever House. I smiled, tracing the waxy crayon lines with my thumb. The door creaked. Housekeeping? A voice called gently from the hallway. I jumped up to answer, waving the young woman inside as she pushed a cart stacked with fresh linens. Just need to grab towels, she said, offering a quick smile. You guys hosting royalty this weekend? I laughed softly. Feels like it. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I began tidying. Half out of habit, half to feel like I had control over something. That's when I noticed the wooden box. It was tucked behind the desk chair, hidden in the shadows. Small. Smooth. The kind of thing someone might mistake for a jewelry case or a keepsake chest. It had ornate carvings on the lid and one word etched in gold along the front. Heirlooms. I knelt down, brushing off a light layer of dust, and gently tried the latch. Locked. Of course it was locked. Still holding it, I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers tracing the filigree. It felt deliberate, like it had been placed there on purpose. But whose? Patricia's? The hotel's? Ella burst into the room minutes later, damp hair and bright eyes wrapped in a towel and bubbling with stories of pool games and Ethan's bad diving form. "What's that?" she asked, eyes zeroing in on the box in my lap. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I found it here." Her fingers brushed the top gently. "Is it a treasure chest? Could be. Can we open it?" "It's locked." She frowned, squinting at it like maybe sheer willpower would make it open. "I bet it has a key." "Probably." She paused, then grinned. "Maybe the key's hiding. Like an Easter egg." I laughed, the sound soft and unexpected. "Maybe," I said. "We'll look later." She nodded solemnly, then flopped onto the bed beside me, humming to herself. I tucked the box beneath the dresser for safekeeping. Whatever it was, it didn't feel like an accident. And if Patricia had anything to do with it, it wasn't just some misplaced knick-knack. Ella curled into my side, warm and weightless, already drifting off. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the tension pulse beneath my skin. The box was a secret. And secrets always have a way of coming out. The dress bag looked wrong the moment I unzipped it. Too small. Too plain. Too beige. Ella had been bouncing around all morning, too excited to eat, talking nonstop about petals and ring pillows and whether she should curtsy or twirl down the aisle. I had waited until she was brushing her teeth before pulling out the flower girl dress, the one we'd picked together. Ivory tulle, soft pink sash, delicate pearls at the neckline. She'd called it her princess armor. This wasn't it. This wasn't even close. I checked the tag. Size 4T. Ella was 9. A sick heat spread through my chest as I rifled through the hotel closet. Nothing. No second bag. No note. Just this sad little dress hanging limp like a forgotten toy. My phone buzzed. "Is Ella dressed yet?" Patricia's text read. "We need her for the photo run-through in 20." I stared at the screen, then back at the dress. My throat tightened. This wasn't a mistake, not a mix-up. Patricia had handled the final garment deliveries. She'd insisted. I marched into the bathroom where Ella was rinsing her mouth. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "there's been a little issue with your dress." She wiped her mouth and smiled up at me, her front tooth missing again after falling out last week. "Did it get glitter on it? Or spaghetti sauce? That happened to Harper once." I knelt, holding the tiny dress up for her to see. Her smile faded. "That's not mine." "I know. Is it for the baby flower girl?" "There is no baby flower girl, Elle." Her eyes darted between the dress and me. "But we picked it. Remember? With the mirror that made my head look huge?" "I remember," I whispered. "This isn't that one." Silence filled the bathroom, heavy and cold. Then, barely audible, "She doesn't want me in it." The way she said it, not with tears, but with quiet certainty, cracked something in me. She wasn't confused. She wasn't naive. She understood. I took her face in my hands. "You listen to me, okay? That woman doesn't decide who belongs. Not here. Not today. You are walking down that aisle in something that fits you, shines like you, and twirls like you." She blinked back at me, her lip quivering. "But what if they laugh? They won't. What if she tells me to sit out? She won't get the chance." I grabbed my phone and called the bridal shop. Explained. Begged. By some miracle, they had one left in stock. One size up, but we could adjust. I threw on jeans, told Ella to stay with Ethan, and bolted out the door like my life depended on it. Because maybe it did. Because that dress wasn't just fabric, it was proof that she was meant to be seen. And I wasn't going to let anyone shrink her down. Not again. Not ever. The rooftop wasn't part of the plan. Neither was the string of fairy lights swaying gently in the evening breeze, or the portable speaker Ethan had somehow smuggled up with him playing Ella's favorite song. That old Motown one she always danced to barefoot in the living room. But there we were, the three of us, slow dancing under a sky full of city light and stars we couldn't quite see. "Needed a break," Ethan said, his voice low as he pulled me close. "You were about 5 seconds away from decking Patricia in the banquet hall." I didn't deny it. My body was still humming from the dress debacle. The fight I didn't start but definitely finished. Ella's new dress, perfect, sparkling, her again, was draped over the back of a lounge chair. She'd just finished her third juice box and was twirling on the concrete like it was a ballroom floor. "She tried to erase her," I murmured. "I know. Not just from the photos. From everything. From us." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I saw the seating chart. I heard the comment about lineage." "Did you?" He nodded. "She's pushing boundaries she doesn't own." I swallowed hard. "I don't want this to ruin everything." He leaned his forehead against mine. "Then it won't. Simple as that." No dramatic speech. No promises he couldn't keep. Just those 4 words, grounded and immovable. That was Ethan. He didn't perform loyalty, he lived it. Ella wandered over, her curls frizzed from the wind, cheeks flushed, barefoot and grinning. "Can we stay here forever?" she asked, plopping onto a lounge chair with exaggerated flair. Ethan chuckled. "You'd miss the waffles." "And my stuffed unicorn," she added solemnly. I sank into the chair beside her, kicking off my heels. "How's our team doing?" "We're winning," Ella said immediately, "even if some people don't like us." My chest tightened, but I kept my smile. "Who told you that?" "No one," she shrugged, "but I can tell." "It's okay though. You and Ethan like me. And you're the captain, Mommy." I looked at Ethan. His eyes were glassy, but he blinked it away. "That's right," he said softly. "And this team doesn't lose." We sat there for a while longer, the music soft, the lights swaying above us, the city alive just beyond the edge of the terrace. For the first time in days, I felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Not in a ballroom, not in someone else's story, just here, together. And for once, that was enough. I never wanted to cry in a public bathroom. But there I was, gripping the edge of the marble sink like it was the only thing keeping me upright, mascara streaking down my cheeks and my breath coming in short, jagged bursts. It had started with a laugh. That bitter, knowing kind that slips out before the pain hits. I'd stepped into the restroom to fix a loose hairpin. I just needed 30 seconds to breathe. But the moment the door swung shut behind me, I heard them. 2 older women, perched near the mirrors, chatting like they owned the space. "Ethan's always been too generous," one of them said. "Takes after his father. No backbone when it comes to women," the other hummed. "And that little girl, sweet but not real blood. You can't just pretend she's one of us. It doesn't work like that." They didn't see me. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. Either way, I froze. Not real blood. It kept echoing, bouncing off the tile and the marble and the inside of my skull. I waited until they left. Until the door shut and silence wrapped around me like a weighted blanket. Then I broke. Silent sobs first. The kind that crawl up your throat and steal your air. Then full, shuddering gasps that bent me over the sink. My reflection blurred and twisted. My skin blotchy, my eyes swollen. This was supposed to be the happiest weekend of my life. Tomorrow, I was marrying a man who loved me. Who loved my daughter. Who saw us as one. And yet here I was. Hiding. Again. Like I didn't deserve the space I took up. There was a knock on the door. Light. Tentative. "Rachel?" It was the coordinator. 5 minutes till family photos. I wiped at my face, smearing the tears into something almost dignified. "Be right out," I croaked. When I stepped back into the hallway, the air felt colder. Thinner. Every smile I passed felt like a test. Every look over a champagne glass, a judgment. Ethan spotted me from across the room. His smile faltered. I tried to fake one of my own, but it cracked halfway there. Ella was twirling by the dessert table, oblivious and glowing. And that's when it hit me. Hard. This wasn't about me anymore. They could whisper. They could judge. They could write me out of their imaginary family tree 100 times over. But they'd never touch her. They'd never make her feel what I felt in that bathroom. Because I would burn down every perfectly folded napkin, every ivory invitation, every smug little tradition if it meant keeping that light in her eyes. Tomorrow, I wasn't just walking down the aisle. I was walking into a war I hadn't asked for. And I'd do it in heels, with my daughter's name stitched into the lining of my dress like armor. Let them watch. Let them seethe. I was done hiding. I didn't expect to see her in the hallway outside the ballroom. The officiant. She was leaning against the wall near the elevators, flipping through a small leather-bound notebook like she had all the time in the world. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Not the polite smile of a stranger, but the kind that says, "I see you." "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked. And that was it. That was all it took. I was crying again. Not the same kind of collapse I'd had in the bathroom. This one was quieter. Grief seeping from my bones. She didn't ask questions, just opened her arms. I stepped into the hug like I'd known her forever. Her name was Reverend Lillian Harper, but she told me to call her Lily. She'd married Ethan's cousin last year and had been handpicked for our ceremony by Ethan's mother. Patricia had called it a safe choice. I'd assumed that meant harmless. But Lily wasn't harmless. She was the kind of woman who spoke in truths, not pleasantries. Who carried strength in the set of her shoulders and kindness in the curve of her words. We sat on a bench in the hallway, my makeup half-wrecked and her completely unfazed. "I heard them," I whispered. She nodded. "I figured something like that might happen. How do you just stand in a room where people think your child doesn't matter?" "You don't stand," she said simply, "you plant." I frowned, confused. She reached into her bag and pulled out a Bible. Old, worn, the edges fraying, the leather soft from decades of hands. "This was a gift from Ethan's grandfather," she said. "Gave it to me the day I performed my first ceremony for the family. Said, 'Use this only when truth is needed.'" I didn't understand what he meant until years later. She handed it to me. "I think it's time." I opened it slowly, unsure of what I was even looking for. Tucked inside the front flap was a small envelope with my name on it. My heart thudded. "I found it while preparing for tomorrow," Lily explained. "It was sealed. I hadn't looked until tonight." My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a note, scrawled in old ink and folded around something thicker. The note was dated just 6 months ago. Ethan's grandfather had written it before he passed. "To the one who brings joy back into our house," it read. "May this gift serve as a welcome, a beginning, and a correction. Laughter belongs here again." I unfolded the paper fully. Inside was a deed. A cottage. Small. Quiet. Nestled on the outskirts of town. Deeded not to Ethan. Not to the family, but to the first child to bring light and laughter back into this house. Ella. My breath caught. Lily watched me carefully. "He knew," she said. "Maybe not everything. But enough." I looked at the signature. The seal. The tiny drawings Ella had tucked in the back, apparently slid into the pages months ago. She'd left them there like treasure. And she was about to find out she'd been the treasure all along. Back in the suite, Ella was sprawled across the bed with her legs in the air like she was auditioning for a sleepover commercial. Ethan was brushing her hair, patient and methodical, like always. They looked up when I walked in, and for a second, the quiet peace of the room made me forget the weight of what I held in my hand. Then Ella spotted the Bible under my arm. "Did you find treasure?" she asked, eyes wide. I laughed, a soft, shaky thing. "Actually, yeah. I think I did." Ethan stood. "What's going on?" I handed him the envelope and watched his brow furrow as he read. Watched his hands go still when he reached the word deed. "To Ella?" he murmured. "This is real?" "She left drawings in the Bible," I said. "Months ago." "I didn't even know." He looked over at our daughter, who was now hopping across the bed pretending to be a frog in a tiara. "She's always been magic," I said softly. Ethan smiled, a little broken. "And we're the last ones catching up." I reached into my purse and pulled out the small locket I'd been saving, an antique piece from my mother's collection. I'd been waiting for the right time. There was a photo of my mother inside and a new one I'd had printed just last week. Ella with Ethan and his parents, all arms and smiles and warmth. "Come here, baby," I said, patting the bed. Ella bounced over immediately, flopping beside me. "I have something for you," I said, placing the locket in her hand. She opened it, blinking at the pictures. "That's Grandma," I said, pointing. "And that's you, with your new family." Her fingers brushed the glass, gentle and unsure. "I don't get it," she whispered. "You're part of something now," I told her. "Not because someone allowed it, not because we're getting married tomorrow, but because you're Ella. And that's enough." She didn't say anything, just threw her arms around my neck, and for the first time all day, I felt steady. Anchored. Ethan sat beside us, wrapping an arm around both our shoulders. "Tomorrow," he said, "we do this our way." I nodded. "And I'm done apologizing." He looked at the deed again, then at the locket, then at the girl between us who didn't know how deeply her existence had just changed everything. "We're going to give that woman the shock of her life," he said, grinning. I smiled, but my voice was firm. "She doesn't get to be the center anymore." Because Ella was the center now. And everyone else? They were just lucky to orbit her. The morning light spilled across the suite like a promise. Ella was already up, sitting cross-legged on the floor in her pajamas, meticulously lining up her flower girl accessories like they were sacred relics. Tiny shoes. A satin sash. The pearl hairband she insisted made her look extra official. I crouched next to her and opened my palm. Her eyes lit up the second she saw it. The locket. "You can wear it today," I said. "It's yours now." She ran her thumb across the smooth metal, then opened it carefully, inspecting the photos again. Her little fingers brushed each face. "Grandma looks kind," she said softly. "She was. And she would have loved you." Ella smiled. "I love her already." I swallowed the lump in my throat and pointed to the other side. "And that one? That's your family now. That's where you belong." She stared at the image. Ethan holding her, his parents flanking them, all beaming. "Even Grandma Patricia?" she asked, a shadow passing over her face. I paused. "Families aren't always perfect," I said carefully. "Sometimes they forget how to be kind, but that doesn't change what you deserve." "Which is?" "To be loved out loud," I whispered. She grinned. "Like, megaphone loud?" "Exactly." She stood and pulled the locket over her head, tucking it beneath her pajama top. Then she hugged me so tightly it knocked the breath out of me. "I'm gonna be so good today," she said, "so Patricia can't say anything." I kissed the top of her head. "You just be yourself. That's more than enough." Later, Ethan knocked and poked his head in. "Car's ready." "My parents are already at the venue." I stepped into the hallway with him, pulling the door gently behind me. "I need you to give this to Lily," I said, slipping the envelope with the deed into his jacket pocket. "Tell her it's for the ceremony. She'll know what to do." He blinked. "You sure?" I met his eyes. "We've been quiet long enough." A slow smile spread across his face. "You want a war?" "No," I said. "I want the truth. Let's see what that does to her." He nodded, kissed my forehead, and headed down the hall with purpose. Back inside, Ella was twirling again. This time, she wasn't practicing for anyone's approval. This time, she knew exactly who she was. And today, the rest of them were about to find out too. Ethan was calm that morning, but it was the kind of calm you feel before a storm hits. He moved with quiet focus, straightening his tie, checking his cufflinks, pressing a kiss to Ella's forehead with just enough pressure to linger. I watched him from across the suite, a knot of nerves twisting behind my ribs. "She's still going to try something," I said. "I didn't mean to, it just slipped out," my voice tight with doubt. Ethan turned, his expression unreadable. "Then let her." I shook my head. "You don't understand. This is control for her. If she can't dictate where Ella sits, what she wears, how we move, she'll make sure everyone knows we're not really part of this." He walked toward me, took my hand, and placed something cold and heavy in my palm. It was the Bible. Ethan's grandfather's Bible. "You're handing it to Lily today," he said, "and she's reading from it during the ceremony." I stared at it, heart thudding. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "It's not just our wedding, it's a statement, and I'm done letting her speak louder than you." There was something in his voice, something final. I'd heard Ethan angry before, sure. But this wasn't anger. This was resolve. "What did your mom say?" I asked. "She doesn't know," he replied. "And she won't until it's too late." That should have terrified me. It didn't. Ella came running into the room, hair half curled and shoes still mismatched. "Can I carry the rings now?" "Please? I already practiced the holding pose." Ethan crouched. "We're saving the grand moment for the aisle. But you'll walk it up. Everyone's going to see you." "Even Patricia?" I looked at her. That brave little face. Hope fighting with worry. "Especially Patricia," I said. When we arrived at the venue, the energy had shifted. Everyone was already seated, the aisle lined with white rose petals and gold lanterns. The backdrop was perfect, elegant, designed to distract. But not today. Today, we had our own plan. Lily met us backstage. I handed her the Bible and her fingers brushed mine with intention. "Everything's going to land exactly how it's meant to," she whispered. Ethan leaned in. "She's going to lose her mind." Lily smiled. "That's the goal." As guests began to settle, we peeked through the curtain. There was Patricia, standing near the guest list with a pen in her hand, checking names with satisfaction. From the smug look on her face, she believed she'd won. She didn't see Ethan pass the Bible to Lily. She didn't notice Ella rehearsing her ring walk with precision. She thought today was hers. And that made what was coming next even sweeter. Patricia stood at the entrance to the aisle like a queen surveying her kingdom. Lipstick flawless, shoulders squared, her expression smug with satisfaction. She had no idea the ground beneath her was already shifting. I watched her from the side of the chapel, half hidden by a curtain. She held the guest list like a weapon, a pen tapping against the edge as she scanned the seating chart one last time. Her gaze paused at the front row, where Ethan's parents were seated beside the two empty chairs reserved for us. Her lips curled into a pleased little smile. Control. That's what this was to her. She glanced at the lineup of bridesmaids, her eyes flicking past Ella without a trace of acknowledgement, as if she was a ghost. But then Ethan walked into place. She saw the officiant walk past her with the Bible. The Bible! Tucked neatly under her arm. And I watched it register. Not panic. Not yet. Just a flicker. A crack in the armor. Lily didn't pause. She moved with the same grace she always had, but this time, there was steel in her spine. She nodded to the musicians. The opening notes floated into the room like silk. Ella was first. She stepped onto the aisle with the rings in her tiny hands, her new dress glowing under the chapel lights. There was no stumbling, no nerves. She held her head high, chin lifted just slightly, like she knew exactly who she was. Patricia's smile faltered. Ethan followed, calm, unbothered. And when he reached the altar, he turned. Not to wait for me, but to look directly at Patricia. He nodded once. Like a warning. She blinked, adjusted her clutch, but said nothing. Then the doors opened. And I walked in. Not as the outsider. Not as the girl from the wrong family. I walked in as the woman who knew exactly what she was walking toward. A man who loved me. A daughter who made everything make sense. And a room full of people who were about to witness what truth looked like when it didn't ask for permission. Patricia turned just slightly, leaning toward one of her sisters. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw the smirk return. A soft shake of her head, like she still thought this was hers to narrate. But she hadn't read the final chapter yet. And the moment she did, she'd realized the story wasn't hers anymore. The music softened as I reached the altar, my hand slipping into Ethan's like it had been waiting there all along. Ella stood just beside us, chin high, fingers gently wrapped around the satin pillow holding our rings. Her locket sparkled beneath her collar, barely visible, a quiet kind of defiance. Lily stepped forward, her voice calm, warm, like sunlight through stained glass. "Dearly beloved," she began, "we are gathered here today not just to celebrate a union, but to witness the creation of something sacred, a family. My chest tightened, and I felt Ethan squeeze my hand, steady and certain. Vows. That's what came next. And somehow, with all the noise of the weekend, the chaos, the cruel whispers and fragile smiles, I had forgotten how powerful words could be when they were honest. Ethan went first. "I didn't just fall in love with you," he said, his voice strong but shaking slightly. "I chose you. Every day. Even when it was hard. Especially then. And I didn't just welcome Ella into my life. She taught me how to be someone worth showing up for." There wasn't a sound in the room, not even a cough. Patricia shifted in her seat. For the first time since we walked in, she looked unsettled. I took a breath. "I thought I had to fight for love," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "that I had to earn a place at the table. But you never made me ask. You just pulled out a chair and said, 'Sit, stay, you're home.' And Ella, she's never known a day without love. Because of you." Ella beamed at us, bouncing slightly in place. When Lily asked for the rings, she stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had already decided how this story ended. Patricia's lips tightened as she watched. She didn't smile, didn't nod. Good, because this wasn't for her. Lily handed us each our ring. No pomp, no overly rehearsed script, just simple words. Promises. Choices. When we slipped them on, the room exhaled. Even the chandelier seemed to settle. Then Lily paused. One breath. "Two. I've been given something to read," she said, pulling the Bible from the table beside her. "A message left behind by someone who wanted this family to remember what truly matters." I saw Patricia freeze. "This is from Ethan's grandfather," Lily continued. "He asked that it be shared when truth was needed most. And oh, did the truth come like thunder." Lily opened the Bible slowly, her fingers steady, reverent. The room held its breath. "In the final pages of this book," she began, "was a letter. A note written by Ethan's grandfather shortly before he passed. You could feel it." How the air shifted. A few people straightened in their seats. Others glanced at Patricia, whose face was now blank, lips pressed into a razor-thin line. "This is what it says," Lily continued. Her voice didn't waver. If anything, it grew stronger with each word. "To the child who brings laughter back into this house, this home is yours." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Confused glances. Whispers. But Lily kept going. "In this family, we've built walls out of silence, of pride, of keeping up appearances. But joy. Joy is what makes a home. And there's only one child I've seen in years who walks into a room and changes its temperature. Who brings people together. Who makes us remember why we ever bothered trying." She looked up then, and her eyes found Ella. "She's the one," Lily said, voice gentle now. "Ella." Every eye turned to my daughter. She didn't shrink. She didn't fidget. She stood up a little taller. "This house," Lily continued, holding up the deed, "was deeded to her. Not because of name, not because of blood, but because she brought life back to a home that had forgotten how to feel." Gasps. Audible now. Patricia stood. Whether to object or flee, I'll never know. But she froze mid-step as Lily folded the deed and tucked it back inside the Bible. "That, ladies and gentlemen," she said calmly, "is the truth." Silence fell again. This time, it wasn't empty. It was thick with realization. The room, once so carefully managed, so tightly controlled, had shifted. Not in volume, but in allegiance. It belonged to us now. To Ella. To the truth. Silence stretched long enough for discomfort to settle in. People weren't sure how to react. The chandelier light flickered like it too was waiting for a cue. Then came the first sound, a quiet sob. Sharp, sudden, real. It came from the third row. Ethan's great-aunt Marie, the one who'd spent the last decade playing gatekeeper to family history, was dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. She stood, slowly, unsteadily, and spoke into the silence. "We were wrong," she said, voice trembling. "We judged. We let pride speak louder than love." Someone behind her nodded. A second voice murmured, "Amen." And then it happened. Like a crack in a dam. The murmurs turned to voices. Words tumbled over one another. "I didn't know she meant so much to him. She always looked at that girl like she wasn't enough. That wasn't right. Ella belongs." You can see it. In the center of it all, Ella clung to Ethan's hand, her eyes wide but calm. She didn't understand the full weight of what was happening, not yet. But she could feel it. The way you feel sun on your face after days of rain. I looked at Patricia. She hadn't moved. Her face was frozen, not in shock, but in disbelief. She scanned the room as if trying to find someone, anyone who still saw it her way. No one looked back. She stepped forward, maybe to speak, maybe to salvage what was left. But Ethan beat her to it. He turned to the guests, raising his voice just enough to be heard. "My daughter," he said, with that quiet conviction that always made people listen. "My daughter owns the home that built this family. That says everything about who she is, and everything about who we were." He turned to Patricia. "You can stay." But the stories changed. Her face twitched. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and walked out. Just like that. No slamming door, no theatrics, just heels tapping against marble as she vanished down the aisle that had never been hers to begin with. The silence left in her wake wasn't awkward. It was relief. Aunt Marie stepped forward and wrapped Ella in a gentle hug, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then others followed. Not a swarm, not a performance, just quiet acknowledgments, hands on shoulders, smiles that finally reached eyes. The kind of acceptance we'd never asked for, but always deserved. Ella looked up at me, still clutching the locket. "Is it over now?" I knelt beside her, brushing a curl behind her ear. "No, baby. It's just beginning." The room didn't erupt into applause, not right away. It was quieter than that. A soft murmur of energy passing from row to row, like everyone was still catching up to what had just happened. And then Ethan did something that took everyone by surprise. He walked to Ella, lifted her into his arms, and turned to face the crowd. "She's not a footnote in our wedding," he said. "She's the reason it means something." A pause. Then he lifted the deed high, like a torch, like a banner, like a truth that could no longer be ignored. "We'll honeymoon at her cottage," he said. "The one she brought back to life. Just by being in this world." And that was when the room broke. Clapping. Cheering. Real, unreserved joy. Not the kind that gets wrapped in small talk and cocktail chatter, but the kind that rises from the gut, messy and full and loud. Ella laughed, burying her face in Ethan's shoulder, then lifting her head to wave at the room like she was royalty. Which, in a way, she was. I stood beside them, stunned, breathless. I didn't even realize I was crying until Ethan reached down, touched my cheek, and whispered, "This is the part where we start breathing again." He took my hand and kissed it, right there in front of everyone. And I believed him. The officiant raised her hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you not just a newly married couple but a family that rewrote the rules and remembered what matters." As people stood and clapped, Ella clung to both of us. One arm around Ethan's neck, the other gripping my fingers tight. Her locket glinted under the lights. The truth was out now. And once spoken, it couldn't be silenced. We walked back down the aisle together. Not as a bride and groom, not just as a mother and child, but as something stronger. Something chosen, something earned. The world outside the ballroom hadn't changed. But we had. And Ella? She had just inherited more than a cottage. She had inherited the last word. The reception bloomed like spring after a long, bitter winter. Warmth returned to the room, slowly at first. Like people were testing the new air, wondering if it was real. And then, as laughter spilled over wine glasses and music swelled through the speakers, it became undeniable. We were no longer guests in someone else's narrative. We were the hosts. Ethan's relatives. The quiet ones, the skeptical ones, the ones who had always seemed to hover near Patricia like orbiting moons, started coming up one by one. Some with soft apologies, others with more weight in their eyes. Aunt Marie hugged me so tightly I almost dropped my champagne. "I should have spoken up earlier," she whispered into my hair. "But I see it now. That little girl, she brought this family back to life." I didn't say anything. I just held her hand, because that was enough. Ethan's father approached next, his eyes fixed on Ella as she danced beneath the string lights with Ethan's mother. He was holding 2 glasses of bourbon, one of which he handed to me. "I've always been slow with change," he said quietly. I took the drink but didn't respond. I wanted to see where he was going. But I watched that girl win over this entire room with nothing but honesty. That's what our name needed. We've been pretending for too long. He tapped his glass against mine. To Ella. I choked back the lump in my throat and clinked his glass. To Ella. And there she was. In the center of it all, twirling with her shoes off, curls wild, cheeks flushed, laughing so freely that it echoed over the music. She grabbed Ethan's hand and spun him into a clumsy dance. He didn't miss a beat. And then, as if sensing it, she broke away and ran to me. "Dance with me, Mama," she cried, already pulling at my hand. I let her drag me onto the floor. We danced until my heels came off, until my cheeks hurt from smiling, until I could barely catch my breath. The room around us blurred. What I saw clearly was this: my daughter, radiant with joy, surrounded by people who finally saw her. Not as a question mark, not as an asterisk, but as the center of a sentence long overdue. For the first time in 9 years, I wasn't just protecting her, I was celebrating her. And the people who had once whispered behind linen-covered tables? They were clapping for her now. Because Ella wasn't just invited anymore, she was the reason they stayed. The candles had burned low by the time the music softened into something tender. Most of the guests had drifted to the edges of the room, laughing quietly over cake or resting their tired feet. The night had thinned, but the magic hadn't. I stood near the edge of the dance floor, barefoot, holding the hem of my dress in one hand and a glass of water in the other. My body ached, in that sweet, heavy way that comes after something beautiful. Ella was still dancing. Her locket shimmered with every spin, catching bits of light like it was gathering them. She moved with no fear, no shame, no heaviness on her shoulders, just joy. Ethan leaned against the far pillar, smiling like he couldn't believe this was real. And I couldn't either. The music shifted. One last slow song. Something soft. Something old. Ella looked around, scanning faces, then found me. She ran, full tilt, giggling with the breathlessness of too much happiness, and crashed into me like a wave. Her arms wrapped around my waist, her little cheek pressing against my stomach. "Dance with me," she whispered, already swaying. I set the glass down, smoothed her hair, and pulled her close. We danced there, in a circle of light and shadow, with nothing to prove and no one left to impress. Just us. Ethan joined us halfway through the song, his hand slipping into mine as Ella spun between us. The three of us moved like we'd always belonged together. Like we'd always been reaching for this moment and had finally caught it. No tension, no pretense, just family. I looked down at Ella and she was smiling with her eyes closed, completely still for the first time all night. "We're home now," I whispered. And I knew she heard me, because she nodded and kept right on dancing.